The Business of Agriculture podcast is brought to you by Land Trust. Did you know sportsmen spend over $5 billion annually in hunter and angler access fees? Land Trust is a platform that connects sportsmen with farmers and ranchers like you who have untapped profits just by providing access to their land. Go to landtrust.com/BOA, as in Business of Agriculture, to see how much you might add to your bottom line.
Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Business of Agriculture. It's me, your host, Damian Mason, but you knew that when you tuned in because it said so in the introduction. Got a great show for you today because I've got a great guest. Smart dude, he's from north of the border. That is, if you're an American, he's north of the border. If you're a Canadian, he's right in your home country. His name is Lionel Kambeitz, and he is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Above Food. I am always keeping my finger on the pulse of things, as you know, to bring information to you, the agricultural professional. And so some stuff that I'm running across, I think this would be very interesting to my listeners because it's probably something they haven't seen much of. We're talking about the future of food. We're talking about trends that are impacting food. We're talking about things like the environmental eating. We're talking about using pulses and alternative proteins. No, we're not going to get into Beyond Meat. We're not going to get into these fights. We're just going to talk about what the future looks like with a guy that is an agricultural background guy who is now a food company owner and founder and CEO of. So anyway, Lionel, welcome to the Business of Agriculture.
Well, thank you, Damian. A pleasure to be with you and your podcast, The Smart Business of Agriculture. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so here's what we got going on is, you know, all of my folks that are listening, they're business people in ag, they might be farmers, etc. And they're so busy doing what they're doing that sometimes there's these things that are coming to the industry and like they kind of see it. But I think that you guys are really doing a good job of seeing something that's a trend in the marketplace to capitalize on. And what I'm talking about is environmental eating and consumers that want some alternative to what they're seeing now. And I always say that these consumers want food that says something about them. All this crap about, oh, you gotta tell your story. I'm like, the consumer doesn't give a crap about your story. They want to buy food that says something about them. And I think that Above Food is capturing this. So let's just start from the beginning. What is Above Food?
Well, thank you very much, Damian. Above Food is a fully vertically integrated seed to fork food company. And what we've chosen to do with our roots in big Canadian and North Dakota agriculture, we've chosen to take what we think are the best proteins in the world, grown in Montana and North Dakota, Saskatchewan, Alberta. This is where the new proteins are grown, like chickpeas and faba beans and red lentils and green lentils and all those great new proteins. And those are emerging as being the feedstock of some of the new plant-based protein foods that are out there. And you know, there's only one thing certain, that 83% of all North Americans will eat more plant-based food in their diet moving forward. And they're looking for a balance between their existing diets and the new plant-based protein industry as it's emerging. You talked about something. Go ahead, Damon.
Just so the listeners don't think, oh my gosh, Damian, you're going vegan here. No, we're not going vegan.
No.
But, and some of the folks are probably saying, hey, wait a minute, I'm in a cranberry business out here in Wisconsin. What's he talking about? A lentil and a chickpea. These are plant-based proteins, as you say, that are expanding rapidly in consumption globally. Some of my Montana clientele, for instance, is like, yeah, we just used to make oats and wheat out here, and now we're growing these lentils. Tell the listener about what a lentil is, and chickpeas, and like you said, the consumption. A chickpea is when you go to a restaurant and have hummus. I mean, so go ahead and give us a little background on that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, these new proteins are adding different flavors and easier flavors to integrate and build into new food products. So chickpeas are a great example. 30, 40 years ago, we had chickpeas in the salad bars across North America. We put those garbanzo beans on top of our salads, and we felt pretty cool. And then 15, 20 years ago, we took those chickpeas and we made them into hummus, and we use those and for chips and dip, and we enjoy that. That same chickpea is providing now the kind of protein and flavor that's being used to, for example, build milk, supplemental milk, where particularly with lactose intolerant, which is a lot of children are, suddenly chickpeas being used for that. The same chickpeas is being used to build gluten-free pasta. So we're sitting there, the people that have the celiac and the gluten intolerance suddenly can do that. So that's emerged. But what's happened, Damian, and you talked about it in your introduction, I call it, there's a little bit of food tribalism going on here, and it's really exciting. And I call it tribalism because it's one group is saying, well, I'm sorry, I'm doing this because I believe in animal welfare. Then another group is saying, I want to eat more plants because I believe in reducing the carbon footprint of what I'm eating. The other group, and some of the people that are my age, the baby boomers, they're sitting there saying, you know, I just think I can feel a little healthier if I start just getting a little more balance in my diet. Most of us are flexitarians. We want to still eat that beautiful steak. We just want to eat a little less of it, and we just want to increase the balance of plant-based into our diets.
I'm not sure that the listener to this podcast wants to eat less steak, but I can say that. And the reality is, you know, per my research, red meat consumption, beef consumption has basically been static. So it's probably, even if it, I guess the example is, even if it stays the same, as you state, there is a bunch of room for these things. Like you said, only 0.7% of the population is actually celiac, but a bunch of people said, well, I just don't want to eat gluten, whatever. We should just say it's ridiculous, but you don't have celiac disease. But you know what? If you want chickpea, garbanzo bean based pasta, we'll do it for you. And so that's kind of what Above Food looks like it's doing. You're saying there's a whole bunch of demand for this. And by the way, what the heck is a lentil? For the person that's like, what's a lentil? What is it? What's it look like in the field?
Well, a lentil looks like a beautiful saucer. It looks like a flying saucer. It's a short plant. It grows. It's a high protein pulse. It's in the same family as the pea or the bean would be. A very same family, except it's got a little bit of a unique taste. And it's been the protein of choice, the plant protein of choice in the Mediterranean countries for many, many years. As soybean was sort of our protein of choice, their protein of choice was the lentil.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
So you're sitting there as Above Food, and you found this company. When did you found this company?
We founded the company in 2017, and the hard part of it was, and I think you and I agree on this, Damian, and I listened to some of your philosophies, that we founded on the principle that these new pulses, these new lentils and chickpeas and faba beans, the new proteins needed to be grown at scale the same way we were growing our other cereal crops, or you were growing your soybeans in America. Yeah. We had to learn to grow them at scale. We've now accomplished that. Now we can grow these crops at scale and be very, very cost competitive, cost effective in growing them.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It's like everything goes through its early niche category. I've got a piece of history here that in the state of Indiana, you know, we founded the American Soybean Association here in the early 1920s or something. We grew like 80,000 acres of soybeans in the United States just a century ago, and now it's 90 million acres. So yeah, that's what's happening, it looks like, with, and I remind all of my audience folks that if you think that these alternative crops are just wacky, well, soybeans were wacky 100 years ago. Canola was wacky until 40 some years ago. So what you described before we went on air, you said exactly what Above Foods does. So you're sitting there saying, we think that we can grow all these plant-based proteins at scale, and they're going to get used for different sorts of products. And we're not talking about Impossible Burgers and nothing that's made in a laboratory. We're talking about stuff that's grown in the field and being eaten as hummus or whatever. Take me from there, 4 years ago to now.
Very, very good. So essentially, we've learned how to grow them at scale. We then understand the genetics that we need that'll have to go into the final form factor. If you can plant a seed today and you know that you're going to use it to make a gluten-free pasta, you'll select the genetics that you're going to plant and move it through the value chain. What Above does is that it starts by putting this contracting to 40 select growers to put the seed in the ground. We acquire the entire crop. We move it through our ingredient value chain. We will then take that particular crop and we'll produce an ingredient from it. We'll produce a flour. We'll produce other products that will from the chickpea, and then we'll sell that ingredient to a food manufacturer. Or, Damian, we're going to go all the way that we're going to own our own brands as well. We want to be fully vertically integrated. We want to grow it at above, and we want you to buy an above product at the end of the value chain.
So above food isn't really the farmer, although you could be. Most of it is contractual. You say, we know that there's a demand for this hummus maker or this this anywhere from whatever, Cisco Foods or to this restaurant chain to Trader Joe's, whatever it is. They want something, and you say, okay, we're going to make it. We're going to get all that done for you. We're going to contract the producer in Montana or Saskatchewan to grow this. And it's going to be per these specs, right? Like that's the big thing, is that they want certain specifications.
Damian, a really good example of that is a company who's done so well globally that's an American success story in the food business, and that's the Tyson family. The Tyson family understood how to the right genetics for chicken, the right nutrition, the right husbandry, and they developed a protocol for growing great chickens. They then contracted a few thousand growers across America, and then along the way, my favorite story, as I like to say, it's a little anecdotal. They stopped in Kentucky and met a military man called the Colonel, and they decided they better be in the chicken ingredient business. So they became chicken ingredient suppliers. Then today, when I go to buy chicken in Phoenix, guess what? 50% of those chicken brands that I'm buying retail are actually Tyson brands. Yeah. So they've done an amazing job of going from understanding how to grow that chicken and controlling that production, all the way to you and I buying their retail chicken. And in the middle, we're buying things from the Colonel in the middle that they supply as well.
Yeah. So you said above food, I'm going to create this company that's going to be sort of like that. So you contract with the producer. It's per a number of specifications. They're making money, and then they get a guaranteed contract for the production, so many tons, bushels, whatever. And then it comes through you, and you might be you might be the processor, or you might contract out the processor.
No, we will. Initially, we are going to more and more, we're moving towards becoming the ingredient processor that's actually making the product. And then we will sell that product, we hope, Damian, first of all, into private label. I mean, some great names like Kroger happen to be the largest plant-based providers in America under the Kroger private label. So that'd be a very good target customer that we would sell our product to, make product for, and sell it to Kroger. But we want the above food eat up brand, as our mom and dad used to say. Eat up, Damian. That's what they used to tell us. Well, that's our brand. We want that brand as well to be on the retail shelf and grow that brand very slowly, like Tyson did. Over 30 years, Tyson gained that retail brand control is what they did.
Yeah, you'll be making other people's brands, and you already are. You already are right now making other people's brands, and you have your own brand or brands. You've got a few different brands. Kind of give me the scoop on that.
Yeah, for sure. There's still an elite group of organic people in the world, and albeit we know that we can't afford to farm organic because we'd have too many hungry bellies in the world if we did. But there is an elite group who can afford organic, and our platform on organic is called Farmer Direct Organic. We are significant suppliers to Whole Foods, the bulk bins. When you buy a bulk bin at Whole Foods, it's a very good chance you're buying our FDO, Farmer Direct Organic. For that market.
And what would that product be?
It's they're primarily whole grains. They will be green peas, yellow peas, lentils, bagged whole grains under the Farmer Direct Organic brand is what they would be.
And so then I go to Whole Foods, I buy organic red, what did you call
them? Lentils. Let's use red lentils as an example.
Lentils. By the way, there's folks right now that know me, they're laughing because they're like, the only time you go to Whole Foods is to do research, and you've probably never taken home. How do you cook a lentil? I don't know. Can I put it on the grill? If I can't put it on the grill and cook it like a steak, it ain't gonna probably happen. Okay, so that's one of your brands, and that's going there already. And so you are going to continue to grow, expand that business as well as some other things.
And we are, and Damian, I think the organic business is very, very slow to expand from this point forward. I think what's happening is, and you come from a great farming background, you're in Indiana, you know this for sure, we will continue to improve how we grow our crops naturally. And it's our responsibility as growers. Now I wear my grower hat for a minute. It's our responsibility as growers to continue to build naturally grown products more responsibly. And that's really where the growth is in the market. I don't think there's a great deal of growth in organic, and that's where the growth is. So the first platform we have is organic. The second platform is exactly that. We call it regenerative natural. So it's naturally grown, non-organic. We because we're growing these proteins in the northern climates, as you're well aware, we have the benefit of the cold. We have the benefit of having less bugs, less critters, less disease, all these other things that allow us to grow a little more naturally, just because of the fact we're in this 90-day frost-free period of 90 days. So we are able to grow the proteins more naturally. And that's really what our objectives are. Naturally grown proteins, high yield, big scale, naturally grown. That's where we think the growth in the market is, Damian.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because the organic thing, that's been the big deal here for the last 20 years, is how it was growing on a percentage basis at 3 times the rate of conventionally grown food. But remember, if you start with very little, 3 times growth rate is, more easily attained when you're 1% of the marketplace or 4% of the marketplace or something like that. So I would concur that organic is growing, but it's the growth rate has decelerated based on everything that I'm reading and researching. And so there's almost like, that's still good. It's still there. Fine. It's a nice niche. It's a profitable niche, appears to be. But now the regenerative, naturally regenerative, I like it. And so do you dictate to your producers what practices they can?
We do. We follow a standard that we call the Natural Food Inspection Agency. And it's a standard, we dictate, for example, all the crops that we produce are grown no-till. Why? Because we want carbon sequestration. No-till is a known carbon sequestration protocol, and we can, if not quantifiable, Damian, at least qualifiable carbon sequestration going on because it's no-till. Secondly, non-GMO. Third, no glyphosate. Fourth, regenerative soil construction, where we ask the farmers to start being engaged in creating better biologicals and more regenerative soil in their naturally grown product. So what's happened, Damian, is that the quality of natural is getting right up against the bottom of where organic was. And yet it can be provided at perhaps 50% less cost. And that's really the benefit.
Yeah. So what's interesting is a lot of folks don't know, and most people listen to this do probably, that organic doesn't mean without pesticides. It's just a certain licensed amount of, they still spray the heck out with copper or whatever. So what you said is your 4 stipulations on your lentil and pea and garbanzo bean and bean production is no-till farming practices, meaning no cultivation, non-GMO, which that means you're not using genetically engineered seed, which are any of those even genetic? Is that even available? There's no GMO garbanzo beans anywhere, are there?
No, but if we go into if we want to go into what we would call a canola oil, a cold pressed canola oil, there is GMO available in that in the oil sector. There is.
Right. So in the beans and lentils and peas, there are no genetically engineered traits available right now, anyhow. But canola, there is. Okay, so no-till, non-GMO. No usage of glyphosate, which is better known as Roundup as the trade name. And then what was your 4th one, Lionel?
It's the biologicals, soil biologicals. And Damian, while some of your readers who are basic core farm producers may not appreciate our 5th, the consumers that we sell to do, we also have a social license side of growing, where we actually have our growers complete a form and attest to how they're managing things like social license, disposal of liquids on their farm, just trying to create a better environmental footprint through social license and that sort of thing. I know that sometimes feels a little soft at the producer level. At the consumer level, it actually has some teeth. Remember, our second biggest driver for plant-based protein is an environmental driver. You said it right. It's environmental food. First is health, a feeling of health. The second is that environmental food driver. And I think we have to provide a better platform for that. And we do. We ask our growers to, what's your policy on a variety of different methods that they're using that really would touch the environment as well.
So, by the way, if you forgot, dear listener, this is Lionel Kambeitz, co-founder and CEO of a company called Above Food. And what he just said, we didn't cover this at all before we started taping. I have been telling my agricultural audiences since early winter that here's what's coming down the pike. Eventually, if you want to be a producer, especially of more niche products, there will be a company that gives you their ESG, their environmental, their social, and their governance standards. Because 10 years ago, only about 80 of the S&P 500 companies published ESG mandates and standards. And now it's 90-some%, over 450, I think, of the Fortune 500 companies said, here's how we tell our vendors they need to behave to do business with us. And you're saying, screw them. But the reality is, the consumer will demand and even generally pay a premium if they say, you know what, I buy this Above Food branded product because I know that their farmers aren't dumping manure down into the streams or disposing of their unused chemical by just throwing it out. Those are the kinds of things that increasingly are going to impact us. And as you stated, the consumer, do they pay a premium for that, or do they just demand it and say, that's what we're going to do, we're going to bitch otherwise?
I think at the end of the day, organic has tried to develop a premium around that. Damian, I think it's going to be table stakes going forward. The fact is that they're just going to expect it. And thank you for mentioning ESG. That's exactly what this is. What I've just defined in those 5 protocols that I've mentioned to you is really an ESG environment around all the things. You know, we ask a question, a very difficult. We actually want to determine some of the standards that are put forward for worker safety. Every industry in the world has worker safety. You and I know the last industry is primary agriculture that really has to start valuing worker safety. Just that recognition at our grower level, just putting on a seminar for our growers specifically about that. This will help them be better growers, and we'll be able to meet that ESG audit requirement moving forward, Damian.
Yeah, and I again, don't shoot the messenger. I know that some of my production ag people are probably like, "Wow, hey, here's the reality. If you want your meat to be processed by any of the big processors, if you were doing things not up to their protocols, you would not have the contract. If you were growing barley to go in my beloved Coors Banquet beer, and you were growing it in all sorts of environmentally insensitive ways, eventually the Coors rep that comes out and gives you your contract is going to say, hey, we ain't renewing you. So this has been going on for a while. I just believe it's going to become even more of the norm, and even probably in stuff that's not just maybe it used to be just for barley or whatever. I think it's going to be everything. I mean, I guess you could still just produce number 2 yellow corn, take it to the elevator discreetly and dump it. But anything that is tying the supply chain together like you are. And I want you to do me 2 things. Who monitors and measures those standards that you're marketing them to your consumer, right. Whether you're marketing them to Kroger or to Kroger's customer. Mm-hmm. But if you get caught once not adhering to that, Lionel, you're screwed. Mm-hmm. So thank you. Who's doing
Damian, isn't that the truth? And of course, The very first discipline is the chain of custody. Now, the identity preserved chain of custody is very difficult. And ultimately, what we do is we start by actually creating a biomarker on the foods that we grow. It's almost like a genetic fingerprint. Every piece of protein has a genetic fingerprint. So we create a biomarker through our company on the foods that we've grown, so we can track and trace all the way through. If somebody at the end of that value chain, Damian's restaurant chain, says something about our protein, would be able to track and trace it all the way back through a genetic biomarker through the system. But ultimately, it starts with grower audits and grower education, grower audits. And then eventually you develop a trust relationship, and you start decreasing the frequency of those grower audits, for example, on no-till. If no-till, you either are no-till or you aren't no-till. There's no gray area there. Is it quantifiable no-till? Yes, it is. Good. Okay. So what are your your genetics? Okay, we will supply you with the genetics, so we know they're not GMO. All right. Glyphosate is just a test. You and I know that, the glyphosate test, that doesn't lie. The test doesn't lie. In some cases, unfortunately, your neighbor's drift is going to be harmful to you, and we have to be cautious and watch that. So yes, early on, there's the protocols that are required to make sure that it meets our standard, and ultimately it becomes self-fulfilling. The growers become better producers. We can grow all the things that we do and say will add no cost or very little cost to producing a pound of great garbanzo beans. It just will add so little cost. Some of it is just awareness, and it's table stakes. It'll be table stakes for that new consumer in Philadelphia and Boston and New York, right. And he or she, they're reading the label. They've got a QR code on the label. They take a picture of it. They want to know how it was grown. It's their right to do it. They're spending their dollar.
So the question that I asked you is, who's doing the monitoring? You just said it's pretty easy for you as a company to do that. So you're not relying, because the organic thing allegedly relies on government-approved auditors, which means I can go and take my licensing, and then through the USDA, I say to be organically compliant, boom, boom, boom. And I have always pointed out that probably works well and good here in Nebraska. But what if I am organically approved and I'm in a third world country? The same places where you're afraid to drink the water, the same places, if you go and take a pee in Mexico in a bar and it says, don't get in trouble, you don't want to be in a Mexican jail tonight. Are those places really adhering to standards? And I would say that there's room for maybe questioning as to whether or not they're really doing their standards. But you are doing this here in Canada, the United States, yourself as a company.
We are, and we're adhering to a standard that we're calling the Natural Food Inspection Agency. It's a standard that we're adhering to, that we're following, and ultimately are going to be providing that stamp on our food. So that's a good start. And Damian, your point's well taken. The country will remain nameless, but we'd be exporting organic yellow peas to an Asian country, and then we'd find ourselves receiving back finished organic products, all grown in Canada originally, and we had more tons coming back than we originally shipped out that were organically grown in the first place. So, Damian, I appreciate your point there. We have to be very judicious and cautious. At the end of the day, we hope that the NFIA stamp is going to be on our foods, and people will say, yes, I trust it. It means no glyphosate. It means no GMO. It means carbon sequestration. It means better regenerative soils. And lastly, social license. It means social license. So that's the intent here, Damian.
By the way, the listeners that are out here saying, this guy, he sounds like he's a little bit of a tree hugger. Let's go ahead and tell him real quickly. You're from a fourth generation massive farming operation in Saskatchewan, and you did have livestock growing up. Right.
We did. And I told Damian earlier that I have a bad case of bovinitis. I just happen to love cattle. And we have a 70,000 acre farm here in southern Saskatchewan. It's a 1899 homestead, fourth generation. The fifth generation, my son is managing it today. And the sixth generation was sitting on my, with a diaper on my knee last night, as a matter of fact, when we were watching Tampa Bay and the Montreal Canadiens play hockey. So how's that for a great, and Tampa won, by the way, which is good. So yes, Damian, our roots are in agriculture, but we have to recognize that we can get ahead of the world here. United States and Canada can get ahead of the world and grow these amazing high productivity, high scalable crops, big bushels per acre. And those crops can be the most naturally grown in the world. We can come right up against that higher growing standard and be leaders in doing it. So I believe in that. And, we're not tree huggers. We're actually pragmatists. We just realized this is table stakes to a young 35-year-old mother in LA. This is table stakes to her. She wants to buy that kind of food.
Yeah, and there's also tremendous economic opportunity, as you pointed out. When I'm there in Montana a few years ago, and I'm doing a thing for I'm doing a speech for the Montana Grain Growers Association, and I'm talking to a producer. He's a sharp guy, and he says, "Yeah, again, we just used to do barley and wheat or whatever up here." He's like, "Now we got this other crop," and he says, "Hell, we're making a lot of money." Well, good for the people in Saskatchewan, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, wherever that should be. Does it come down, do you think, is there going to be a dispute between you and let's say the Tyson, like you talked about, because are people going to switch off from chicken to your product?
No, I think this is a very, very slow, a slower revolution. I think the young are young women under the age of 16. The number of them that are practicing veganism is a phenomena, and it has to be addressed, which is interesting. There's people that are the next generation has some interest in animal rights, and we know that in that protocol, animal rights has come so far and has done such good work. We understand how well the animal tissue business has come in terms of hormones and some of the other things that were the original enemies. What we're doing in plant-based agriculture is what is really, to a certain degree, what the meat industry has done for the last many years. You mentioned earlier, they are getting better at being healthier. They're getting better at all the things that they have to do to build better food. So I think it's a slow push in that regard. But there are countries in the world that the issue is not enough protein. Let's use India, which is primarily a vegetarian country, but the issues are chain of custody and the quality of the protein. One of the things we do in America, Canada, and a few European countries is we just take food safety and food branding for granted. You and I go to the store, we throw it in the darn cart. We want to get out of there as quickly as possible so we can go home and watch the ball game and eat whatever we put in the cart. We don't realize that there's only about 1.5 billion of us in the world who live in an environment where there is food safety. The rest, it's all buyer beware. Yeah. I mean, this is a terrible thing to say, but the last time I was in China, my daughter and I were there. We were traveling down the road. We stopped at a store and we bought some groceries, and we bought 6 Heineken, the most recognized beer brand in the world. We took it back to our hotel room, and it was counterfeit beer. It had been packaged in a Heineken box, and it wasn't Heineken beer. It just made me realize that how we take food and label safety for granted. So I think the plant-based food business can and what we're doing in America and Canada can really help the other parts of the world that are today relying primarily on plant-based foods, Damian.
Yeah, and you mentioned India. It's my understanding that a lot of the plant proteins you're talking about go there, and it's about a 2/3 vegetarian country. Mm-hmm. They'll say it's more than that because they're supposed to not eat beef because of religion and all that. But the truth is they like a good steak once in a while too. But a lot of your stuff's going there, and you can bring, as you say, quantity because of our efficiency of production, and you can also bring a safety. And so it's actually very good for the nation's hungry. There's not a lot of fat Indians. There's a lot of. So I mean, they need your product.
Yeah, they do. They do, Damian. And America, we take this for granted, us farmers, I'm raised on the farm, and you are raised on the farm there as well, Damian. But we don't realize that what we've accomplished in agriculture is in terms of scale and quality is absolutely world leading, world beating. It's amazing what we've accomplished. And we're right at the cusp of actually feeding the world better. Just safer, better. We can do that here. America and Canada can drive that. We're a company that's going to simply take that philosophy and move it through the entire food chain. And it's exciting.
I agree with you, and it is exciting. That's why I wanted to have you on, because there's a lot of growth potential here. And again, dear listeners that are out there in the pork, poultry, meat, but no, I'm not doing it. I'm not selling you out. I just see, you know what we're going to do? You want to be successful in tomorrow's agriculture? See where the customer is and where the customer's going. And since we talked about hockey, it's the most overused quote in business of all time. But since I got a Canadian on here who loves hockey, what did Wayne Gretzky say? You're not the best hockey player. You're not called the great one because you skate to where the puck is. You skate to where the puck is going. And that's where Above Food is. They're going to where the consumer is going. Maybe more so in some of the other countries. Numbers. You got anything for me as we close out the door here, Lionel?
Absolutely. We're about a $220 to $250 million company right now on revenue. We're accelerating to be $1 billion company by 2025. So we're going to be $1 billion company by 20. Now, our challenge, Damian, is to take what you and I know very well, how to grow these foods better, and to take those up and keep bringing more of those into our value chain to build ingredients. So our challenge is to continue to take the best proteins, the best chickpeas in the world may be grown in Chester, Montana. So let's take that best garbanzo bean from Chester, Montana, take custody of it, move it through the chain, and figure out how to build the highest quality hummus, the best pasta, the best gluten-free pasta. That's where we have to spend our money to improve our margins and build our company on that. So we're controlling the custody of the best proteins in the world. Now we're going to control the ingredient manufacturing portion of it as well, Damian.
Yeah, and I think the neat thing is we didn't talk about just doing it low cost. Ag forever of your life and my life has always been about, I can make more of it and do it cheaper, which is a very commodity mindset. It's also a zero return. You've got to get out of that. You talked about better. You talked about standards. You talked about consumer appeal through things that are important to them. You never once said we can be cheaper. So I appreciate that. His name's Lionel Kambeitz. He's a co-founder and CEO of Above Food, which you've got some exciting news in the next few months. What's going to happen with Above Food?
Well, we're just looking to our intentions are to go public on the NASDAQ in New York City and raise additional funds. And the monies that we're going to be raising will be used to take that chickpea and process it into that ingredient. This is the next round for us to do. So we're excited. Above's going to be trading on the NASDAQ. We're going to be available to have producers watch us, to have consumers watch us, and Damian, to have the business of agriculture watch us as well.
That's right. Well, the business of agriculture might end up being an investor because you've had some pretty good reasoning about how this company can grow and expand because of what's happening in the marketplace. Anyway, thank you very much for being here. He's the CEO of Above Food. Go and check him out. If they want to contact you, they go to abovefood.com.
Exactly right, Damian. But continued success, by the way, and the kind of job that you're doing and bringing ideas like this to the face of producers in agriculture, critically important. So thanks a lot for your interest, Damian, in this.
I appreciate that. All right, Sam, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please, pass this along to anybody, even a non-ag person. It's great stuff. Thank you, Lionel, for being here.
All the best. Take care now.
Until next time, it's the Business of Agriculture.
Thank you for tuning into the Business of Agriculture podcast, sponsored by Land Trust. Land Trust partners with farmers and ranchers to capture pure profit from sportsmen seeking new experiences and places to hunt and fish. Land Trust built the platform and does the marketing. You maintain 100% control of access and activities, and you set the rules. There's no cost or obligation when you list, and the next 10 Business of Agriculture listeners who go to landtrust.com/BOA are eligible for a gift worth over $2,000.